All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're exploring a really radical idea. It's not just about tweaking a few policies. It's about redesigning the very foundation of our society to fight one of the most silent, painful crises of our time: loneliness. So let's explore this idea, the architecture of belonging.
So let's just start with this question, because it gets right to the heart of everything we're talking about today. We usually think of loneliness as our own private battle, right? Something you fix by calling a friend or maybe joining a new club. But what if that's the wrong way to look at it? What if social isolation is actually a deep crack in our social foundation, a crack that needs a political blueprint to fix?
Okay, so first things first, let's frame the problem we're actually trying to solve here. We are facing a genuine loneliness epidemic, and it's becoming crystal clear that this isn't just a bunch of sad individual stories. It's a sign of a much bigger systemic failure that has huge consequences for every single one of us. And that, right there, is the crucial point. When something affects millions of people, when it impacts both mental and physical health on a massive scale, it stops being just a private pain. It becomes a full-blown public health crisis. And a crisis like that demands a public, coordinated response. It's exactly why some are arguing that the state has to fundamentally rethink its role in our social lives.
So that brings us to the proposed solution. And this isn't about small adjustments here and there. It's about fundamentally reimagining what we even consider a basic human right in the first place. It's about a new social contract.
This simple comparison just lays it out so clearly. It's a profound shift in thinking. See, traditionally, our fundamental rights, things like freedom of speech or privacy, they were all designed to protect us from the state getting too powerful. This new concept, though, it proposes a right that actually requires the state to actively connect us to each other. It's a total flip from defense to offense in the fight for social well-being. And here it is, the formal proposal. The fundamental right to society. What this would mean, in practice, is embedding a guarantee into our Constitution. A guarantee that every single person has the ability to participate in society. It would make the fight against loneliness not just some nice policy goal, but a core duty of the state.
Okay, so having a right written down on paper is one thing. But how do you make it, real? Well, you build a new kind of infrastructure. A social infrastructure. Think about it. Just like we build roads and bridges to connect places, this blueprint is all about building the structures that connect people.
The first pillar of this whole thing is physical, state-supported community hubs in every neighborhood. But forget about some dusty old community center. The vision here is for vibrant, central contact points designed specifically to help people connect. These are places you could go for organized stuff, sure, but also just to grab a coffee and have a casual chat. Spaces literally engineered to create those spontaneous social bonds that are so often missing from our lives today.
But what about people who can't easily get to one of these hubs? That's where the second pillar comes in, and it's all about proactive, personal outreach. This would involve actual organizations, maybe social workers or trained volunteers, who actively arrange visits for those who need it most. Imagine a system where an elderly person living alone is guaranteed regular companionship, not as an act of charity, but as their fundamental right. It's a direct, human-to-human countermeasure to make sure nobody falls through the cracks.
Of course, a system this ambitious is only as good as its design. For a right to society to actually mean anything, it can't be a privilege for the healthy, or the young, or the outgoing. The absolute core principle guiding this entire framework has to be inclusivity for all.
And I think this quote just captures the core promise perfectly. It's not about providing services for some people, it's about guaranteeing all people have adequate access to community. And that word adequate is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It implies there's a minimum standard of social well-being that the state has a duty to uphold for every single citizen.
So how do you actually pull this off in the real world? Well, the approach is basically threefold. First, you assess what each region actually needs, because what works in a big city is not going to work in a small town. Second, you design everything to be accessible, making sure that physical ability or age is never a barrier. And third, you create a system that serves all circumstances, a universal safety net of support. It's tailored, but it's for everyone.
So let's zoom out and look at the ultimate takeaway here. When you put all of these pieces together, the constitutional right, the social infrastructure, the inclusive design, what you're left with is something pretty profound. A state-guaranteed right to belong.
You know what we're really talking about is a potential evolution in our political thinking. It suggests that the goal of a modern state shouldn't just be to protect individual freedom, but to also actively nurture our collective well-being. The argument is that you can't really have one without the other.
Which brings us right back to where we started, with a question for you to think about. In a world that feels more and more fragmented, should belonging be considered a basic, fundamental human right, just like freedom of speech? What would our society really look like? And what could we gain if we decided the state had a duty to connect us? Thanks for tuning in.